It is possible to succeed with multiple party-loving, troublemaking athletes on the same team. But when it goes wrong, it can go so wrong. There just might be some beef. In the late 80s, Brazilian soccer was beginning to snap out of a drought. Homegrown talent was finally returning to a level the nation hadn't seen since Pele's heyday in the 60s and 70s. One rising star was Romário de Souza Faria, a forward from Rio de Janeiro who would eventually develop into one of the greatest footballers in Brazilian history. Romário first starred as a dazzling striker for his hometown club, Vasco da Gama, and took under his wing a player from Vasco's youth squad, Edmundo Alves de Souza Neto. Romário was like a big brother to Edmundo. Both were talented players, and more importantly, both were party guys who loved to skip practice, drink, and have lots of sex. They reportedly had it written into their contracts that they could go out clubbing every night, which is pretty impressive. Romário would soon depart and become an international star, leading top-flight European clubs like PSV and Barcelona, and playing the role of mercurial leader for Brazil's national team when they won the 1994 World Cup. Romário was a sensational player at every level, but difficult and totally unwilling to follow rules. He infuriated coaches with his lack of discipline, partied far more than he trained, and got suspended for throwing a punch in Spain. Things got so tense at Barcelona that in early 1995, he suddenly returned to Brazil. Edmundo, the younger of the two, didn't have the same international breakthrough as his mentor, but he had Romário matched in the troublemaking department. Nicknamed the Animal, Edmundo became a star for Brazilian champion Palmeiras, but clashed with his coach, had a fistfight with a teammate, attacked a match official, and eventually got thrown off the team. By this point, Romário had signed with the Brazilian club Flamengo after fleeing Europe. With Edmundo now free, the elder player insisted his old friend join him. The two had an out-of-control stint together at Flamengo. They were part of a huge brawl in the 1995 Supercopa Libertadores. The so-called bad boys got along together just fine, and they even recorded a rap together. In late 1995, Edmundo's rampant partying turned tragic. He drove a car after drinking during Rio's Carnival and got into an accident that killed 3 people. Over the next 2 or 3 years, both players bounced separately between clubs, and Edmundo bounced in and out of jail while his manslaughter case was being appealed. They were separate but on good terms until the approach of the World Cup in 1998. Romário starred for Brazil in the 94 World Cup and had later national team success as part of the row-row tandem with Ronaldo. But because of somewhat vague injury concerns, the 32-year-old was left off the 98 World Cup squad, which upset him quite a bit. Edmundo made that team as a sub. His presence only really came into play when Ronaldo suffered from mysterious convulsions before the final match. Edmundo replaced him in the pre-match starting 11 until the last second, when Ronaldo was deemed fit enough to play in what ended up being a loss to France. Meanwhile, the bitter Romário retreated to the beachside bar he'd opened in Rio and, in typical fashion, stirred controversy by painting cartoons of Brazilian coaches and players on the doors of bathroom stalls. Edmundo, who was depicted alongside an ex-girlfriend, insisted the cartoons get removed, but they didn't. No one realized how deep a wedge Romário had driven between himself and Edmundo until the two players reunited, which of course happened because of bad behavior elsewhere. Around the time of the World Cup, Edmundo was playing in Italy with Fiorentina, at times quite well. But surprise, he fell out of favor with the team for bad behavior, like flying back to Brazil in the middle of the season so he could party at Carnival while the team he left behind fell out of first place. So in '99, Edmundo returned to Brazil, where prosecution for his 1995 manslaughter charges was still ongoing. And he somehow found even more controversy after being photographed feeding beer to a chimpanzee at his son's birthday party. At this point, there weren't a lot of teams willing to put up with Edmundo, and he ended up back with his original club, Vasco da Gama. With Edmundo starring, Vasco qualified for a spot in the inaugural Club World Cup, to be hosted in Brazil in January of 2000. Before they'd have to face some of the best clubs in the whole world, Vasco wanted to add some extra firepower. As it turned out, Romário had recently fallen out of favor at Flamengo because he feuded with coaches and partied instead of practicing. Here is a relevant quote from that stint. So yeah, he was free, and Vasco hurried to sign him up. Romário actually joined Vasco da Gama after the Club World Cup registration deadline, but this is FIFA we're talking about. The rules are all kind of suggestions. Edmundo and Romário sounded content to play together. And they had some brilliant moments together during the Club World Cup. Romário scored twice and Edmundo once to beat Manchester United, proud moments in what is now a legendary game. Vasco made it to the World Cup final, but lost in a round of penalties that ended when Edmundo missed the crucial final shot. After the tournament, with the 2000 season approaching, Vasco wanted Romário to stick around. He signed on the condition that he could be team captain, an honor that had until then belonged to Edmundo. Edmundo was not pleased. He disappeared for a bunch of games, then returned to an icy situation with Romário. They basically refused to share the ball. It all came to a head in a game against Bangu in March of 2000. Edmundo was tackled in the box. He set up to take a penalty kick, only for Romário to brush him aside, grab the ball, take the penalty himself, and miss. Approached by a reporter at halftime, Edmundo lashed out at his coach for letting all this happen.
Não, quem manda é o homem lá, rapaz. Eu só tô treinando. Só eu que tava treinando os pênaltis, mas quem manda é o homem. O homem quer que bata o príncipe, eu não tenho culpa.
Days later, Romário scored a goal and fired back.
É isso aí, agora a corte está toda feliz, o rei, o príncipe e o bobo.
Reporters devoured the conflict between the two. It got to the point that Edmundo and Romário were both banned from speaking publicly at all. A Vasco-loving priest was enlisted to try to help them reconcile, but that didn't help. Edmundo was finally loaned out, an occasion marked by Romário saying he hoped to never play with Edmundo again. They did play again. In 2004, the two reunited with the Brazilian side Fluminense, and the beef had definitely thawed. Romário even went on to be Edmundo's manager during a brief reunion with Vasco da Gama. These days, Romário is a politician and Edmundo is one of his party's supporters. But squashing the beef in retirement just isn't the same. The lesson of Edmundo and Romário isn't that troublemaking players can't coexist, it just demonstrates how precarious such an arrangement can be. How the slightest push can set two volatile individuals against each other and create a uniquely explosive beef. Thanks a lot for watching Beef History. To be honest, these guys did a lot of stuff in their careers, and there's probably some stuff that we didn't get to cover, so feel free to tell us about it in the comments or on Twitter, or you can write me a letter or something, I don't know.